The rain fell in sheets over the capital city of Ethelgey Road, turning the cobblestone streets into rivers of mud and shadow. In the great hall of the Dragon Palace, the candles had burned low, their wax pooling like molten treacherous on the silver holders. The smell of incense and wine hung thick in the air, a cloying sweetness that did nothing to mask the metallic tang of blood that had begun to seep into the floorboard. RDS Lady Seraphina Vance knelt on the cold stone floor, her silk gown ruined beyond repair, the deep crimson of its fabric now indistinguishable from the blood that soaked through it. Her hands were bound behind her back with rough hemp rope, the fibers biting into her wrists until they bled. Her hair, once the envy of every noblewoman in the kingdom, a cascade of raven silk that fell to her waist, was now a tangled mess, matted with sweat and gore. She could barely lift her head. The pain was everywhere, a dull, throbbing ache in her ribs where the RDS had kicked her, a searing fire in her shoulder where the blade had bitten deep, and the crushing, suffocating weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest like a stone. Her husband, Crown Prince Aldrich of the House of Ember, stood before her. He was still radiant, even now. His golden hair was immaculate, his royal robes of sapphire and silver unblemished. He looked every inch the future king she had sacrificed everything to place upon the throne. And yet, as he read down at her, his blue eyes held not a shred of warmth. They were cold, empty, the eyes of a stranger. "You always did have a talent for making yourself indispensable," Aldrich said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "But every tool has its limits, Seraphina. You served your purpose. You helped me secure the crown. And now you are no longer needed." Seraphina's throat burned. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a ragged, wet cough. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. She had been beaten, stabbed, and left to bleed out on the very floor where she had once danced in his arms at their wedding feast. How could you?" she finally managed, her voice a broken whisper. "I gave you everything. My family's fortune. My father's arms. My own blood. I killed for you. I lied for you. I loved you." Aldrich laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Love, you think I wanted love, I wanted power. And you were simply the most convenient path to it." He knelt down, bringing his face level with hers. His hand reached out, and for a moment, she thought he might touch her cheek, might offer some final, twisted kindness. Instead, he grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look at him. "Your father was a fool to trust me. Your brothers were fools to die for me. And you, Seraphina, were the biggest fool of all." Tears streamed down her face, but she refused to sob. She refused to give him that satisfaction. She had been a fool. She had been blind, so utterly and completely blind. She had seen only what she wanted to see, a prince who needed her, a man who loved her, a future where they would rule together as equals. She had been so desperate to be his queen, so eager to prove her worth, that she had ignored every warning sign. She thought of her father, the great Duke of Ashford, who had warned her against the match. "He is ambitious, Seraphina," her father had said, his lined face etched with worry. "Too ambitious. He will use you and discard you. Mark my words." She had laughed at his concerns. She had told him he was being paranoid, that Aldrich was different, that their love was strong enough to withstand any trial. And then, when Aldrich had needed her father's arms to secure his claim to the throne, she had convinced the old Duke to march to war. He had died on the battlefield, leading the charge that had won Aldrich his crown. His last words, whispered to her in a letter delivered by a dying messenger, had been, "I forgive you, my daughter. I only wish you could forgive yourself." But it wasn't just her father's death that haunted her. It was the rest of her family, too. Her 2 brothers had been murdered in the chaos of the coup, their bodies found in the river with their throats cut. Aldrich had told her it was the work of enemy agents, that they had died as heroes. She had believed him. She had mourned them, wept over their empty graves, and never once questioned the convenient timing of their deaths. And her mother, gentle, fragile Lady Cordelia, had been so devastated by the loss of her sons and husband that she had taken her own life. Seraphina had found her in the Reborn, a vial of poison clutched in her cold, limp hand. She had screamed, had called for help, but it was too late. Her mother was gone, and Seraphina had been left alone, the sole survivor of a family that had been systematically destroyed. She had never suspected Aldrich. Not until the moment the Guardias had dragged her from her chambers, not until she saw the cold, satisfied smile on his face as he watched them beat her. But it wasn't Aldrich alone who had orchestrated her downfall. No, the true mastermind had been closer to home. Much closer. A rustle of silk drew her attention to the side, where a figure emerged from the shadows. It was her half-sister, Lady Amara, the sweet, gentle, seemingly harmless Amara who had always played the role of the devoted sister, the one who never wanted anything for herself, who was content to live in Seraphina's shadow. Amara was dressed in a gown of emerald silk, far more extravagant than anything Seraphina had ever seen her wear. Her auburn hair was styled elaborately, woven with pearls and gold thread. She looked like a queen. And as she smiled down at Seraphina, her expression was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. "Did you truly believe I would always be your loyal little sister?" Amara said, her voice lilting with false sweetness. "All those years, watching you be celebrated, praised, courted. You had everything, Seraphina, everything I wanted. Our father's love, our family's fortune. And then, when you ride the prince, you got the one thing I desired most, the chance to be queen." Seraphina read at her, her mind struggling to process the betrayal. You helped him. You helped Aldrich destroy our family." Amara laughed, a tinkling, musical sound that was so completely at odds with the cruelty in her eyes. "Oh, I did more than help. I was the one who told him how to break you. I was the one who whispered in his ear that your brothers were a threat, that your father was a liability. I was the one who encouraged him to take the throne by force, to use your family's resources and then discard you like the broken tool you always were." Seraphina's blood ran cold. "All those years, all those nights you spent at my side, comforting me, telling me you loved me, it was all a lie, a lie." Amara tilted her head, a mockery of innocence. "No, our sister. It was strategy. You were the golden child, the one everyone adored. But I was patient. I watched. I reneged your weaknesses, your desperate need to be loved, your ridiculous loyalty to people who would never deserve it. You made it so easy." She stepped closer, her eyes glittering with malice. "And now look at you, kneeling in a pool of your own blood, abandoned by everyone you trusted. How does it feel, Seraphina?" To be the one who falls. Seraphina's vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to focus. She would not break. Not in front of them. She had already lost everything. Her family, her honor, her hope. But she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her beg. "Why?" she asked, her voice raw with anguish. "Why did you hate me so much?" Yemera's smile faltered for just a moment, replaced by something to recur, something that had been festering beneath the surface for years. "Because you were everything I was not. Our father loved you. He gave you everything. And what did I get? Scraps. Leftovers. The reminder that I was nothing but a Basta RD child, a stain on the noble house of Vance." She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You were the sun, Seraphina, and I was always in your shadow. But now the sun has set, and I will be the one who rises." Aldrich stepped forward, placing a possessive hand on Amara's shoulder. "Enough, love. Let her die in peace. We have a kingdom to rule." Seraphina watched as he pulled Amara close, their lips meeting in a kiss that was as hungry as it was cold. They had been lovers all along. While she had been playing the devoted wife, while she had been sacrificing everything for his cause, they had been laughing at her, plotting against her, enjoying their secret affair right under her nose. A new wave of pain washed over her, not from her wounds, but from the sheer enormity of the betrayal. She had trusted them. She had loved them. And they had repaid her with death. She thought of the night she had helped Aldrich seize the throne. She had stood by his side, her hand in his, as he had made his grand declaration. She had believed they were partners, equals. She had dreamed of a future where they would rule together, a golden age of peace and prosperity. But now she realized that she had been nothing more than a stepping stone, a tool to be used and discarded. Her sacrifice, her loyalty, her love, none of it had meant anything to him. He had seen her as a means to an end, and now that the end was achieved, she was simply irrelevant. She remembered a conversation she had overheard months ago, a conversation she had dismissed as meaningless gossip. Two courtiers, whispering in a corner of the banquet hall. "They say the prince's belongs to another," one had said. A lady of the court, very beautiful, very ambitious. Serafina had laughed it off. She had been so certain of Aldrich's devotion, so sure of their bond. She had ignored the warning signs, the late nights, the secret meetings, the way Amara had sta root ape ring everywhere Aldrich went. Now it was all so clear. The way Amara had always been there, always offering advice, always looking out for her sister's best interests. The way she had slowly poisoned Serafina's mind against her own family, convincing her that her father was too cautious, her brothers too reckless. The way she had planted seeds of doubt, making Serafina question everyone except the two people who were destroying her. The betrayal was absolute. There was no one left to save her, no one to avenge her. She was alone. Aldrich drew a dagger from his belt, the blade glinting in the candlelight. It was a beautiful weapon, the hilt set with rubies that matched the color of the blood-staining Serafina's gown. "I will make this quick," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You do not deserve even that much, but I will give it to you. Consider it my final gift." Serafina closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, her gentle, broken mother, who had taken her own life in despair. She thought of her brothers, who had died screaming, their bodies floating in the river. She thought of her father, who had known all along that Aldrich was a snake, who had tried to warn her, who had died for her mistake. And she thought of herself, of the girl she had once been, bright and hopeful and full of love, of the woman she had become, hardened by grief and loss but still clinging to the belief that love could conquer all. She had been wrong. So terribly, terribly wronged, the cold steel pressed against her throat. She opened her eyes one last time. Sta ring up at Aldrich. He was looking at her with something that might have been pity, but she knew it was just indifference. She was nothing to him. She had never been anything to him. "Any last words?" he asked. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. There was too much to say, and none of it would matter anyway. So she did the only thing she could. She read at him, not with anger, not with hatred, but with a cold, steady contempt. "You will never be the king you pretend to be," she whispered. "You are ria kawe rd Aldrich, and kawe rds always fall." His eyes flickered with something, anger, perhaps, or fear, and then he pressed the blade deeper. The pain was searing, blinding, a white-hot fire that consumed everything. She felt the blood spilling from her throat, felt her life draining away, pooling on the cold stone floor like an offering to a merciless god. And then, everything went to RK. For a long, endless moment, there was nothing. No pain, no fear, no betrayal. Just silence. Just peace. But then, the peace shattered. A RP, burning cold, gripped her lungs, forcing them to expand. Her eyes flew open. She was gasping, choking, her body convulsing as it fought to draw breath. The world swam into focus around her, and she found herself sta ring at a ceiling she had not seen in years, the familiar cracked plaster of her childhood bedroom at the Vance estate. She was alive. She was in her old room. She looked down at her hands. They were small, unblemished, free of the calluses and scars she had acquired in her years of political maneuvering. She touched her throat. expecting to feel the gaping wound. But there was nothing. No pain. No blood. Just smooth, unbroken skin. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She scrambled off the bed, her legs almost giving out beneath her as she stumbled to the mirror. The face that Sta read back at her was young. So impossibly young. She was 17 again. Her hair was still long and black, falling in waves past her shoulders. Her skin was soft and unlined, untouched by the grief and exhaustion that had marked her in her final years. It was the morning before her wedding to Aldrich. The day she had been so excited, so hopeful, so foolish. She pressed her fingers to the glass, Sta ring at her reflection. The reflection Sta read back, trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. But there was something else in those eyes, too. Something cold and sharp and utterly determined. She had been given a second chance. A miracle. A rebirth. The sounds of the estate drifted through the window. The distant clatter of the kitchens, the murmur of servants, the cheerful song of a morning law arcade. It was all so vibrant, so alive. So different from the cold, silent void she had descended into. And then a knock came at the door. Serafina de Rest's sister. Are you awake? It was Ama Ra's voice, sweet and gentle. The voice of a devoted sibling, worried about her sister on her wedding day. Serafina turned from the mirror. Her reflection smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of the lips. The old Serafina would have thrown open the door, embraced her sister, thanked her for her concern. The old Serafina had trusted Amara with her whole heart, but the old Serafina was dead. She walked to the door, her step steady, her expression calm. When she opened it, she found Amara standing there, dressed in a lovely gown of pale yellow, her auburn hair perfectly arranged, her eyes full of feigned concern. Are you all right? Amara asked, her voice a perfect blend of worry and kindness. You look pale. Is it nerves about the wedding? Serafina looked at her. Looked at the sister who had conspired with her husband to destroy her family, who had murdered her brothers, who had driven her mother to suicide, who had stood by and watched as she bled out on the floor of the palace. A cold, quiet fury settled deep in her bones. It was a fury that burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns, a fury that would not be extinguished until she had taken everything from them. Every title, every coin, every shred of happiness. She smiled at Amara, the same sweet, trusting smile she had worn in her first life. But this time, there was steel behind it. I'm fine, sister, she said, her voice soft and innocent. Just excited. It's going to be the most perfect day. Amara smiled back, utterly unaware of the storm she had just awakened. Oh, yes, Serafina thought as she stepped into the corridor, her hand linked with her sister's. It is going to be the most perfect day. Perfect for the RT of my revenge. The game had changed. The players were the same, but the rules had been rewritten. And this time, Serafina Vance was not the victim. This time, she was the hunter. The morning sun spilled through the lattice windows of the Vance estate, casting golden patterns across the worn wooden floor. Serafina stood at her dressing table, her fingers tracing the edge of the ivory comb that had belonged to her mother. In her first life, she had been too consumed with excitement to notice the small details, the way the light caught the dust motes floating in the air, the distant sound of the stable hands preparing the cierage, the faint scent of lavender from the garden below. Now, every sensation was sharp, vivid, almost painful in its intensity. She was alive. She was young. And she had a purpose. Amara had left moments ago, satisfied that her sister was still the same naive, trusting fool she had always been. Serafina had watched her go, her smile fixed in place until the door clicked shut. Then she had allowed herself one moment of raw, unfiltered emotion. Her hands had trembled. Her breath had come in short, ragged gasps. But she had not wept. TRS were a luxury she could no longer afford. She moved to the window and looked out over the estate. The gardens were still beautiful, the roses blooming in shades of crimson and gold. She remembered the day her mother had planted them, her slender hands caked with soil, her laughter ringing out as young Seraphina had tried to help. That memory had been buried beneath the RS of grief, but now it surfaced, RP and bittersweet. Her mother was still alive. Her father was still alive. Her brothers were still alive. They were all breathing, all walking, all within her reach. And she would save them. She would save every single one of them, even if it meant ring the world APART to do it. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. This time, it was not AMARA. The knock was hesitant, almost apologetic, and Seraphina knew immediately who it was. "Enter," she called, her voice steady. The door creaked open to reveal a young woman with mousy brown hair and a face that was too plain to be remarkable. She was dressed in the simple gray gown of a lady's maid, and her eyes were downcast, her shoulders hunched as if she expected to be struck. Her name was Ella R.A., and in Seraphina's first life, she had been a faithful, devoted servant. She had been dismissed by AMA Ra's machinations mere weeks after the wedding, accused of stealing jewelry she had never touched. Seraphina had believed the lie, too caught up in Aldrich's world to question her sister's word. Ella R.A. had been sent away in disgrace, and Seraphina had never seen her again. "I'm sorry to disturb you, my lady," Ella R.A. murmured, her voice rely above a whisper. "But your sister, Lady AMARA, she asked me to bring you this." She held out a small velvet box, her hands shaking slightly. "She said it was a wedding gift, something to match your gown." Seraphina took the box and opened it. Inside lay a brooch of pale pink sapphires, delicate and lovely. It was the exact shade of the gown she had been planning to wear, the one AMARA had helped her choose. In her first life, she had been touched by the gesture. She had worn the brooch with pride, showing it off to everyone who would admire it, never suspecting that the sapphires were cursed, or rather, that the clasp had been subtly weakened, designed to fail at the worst possible moment. At the wedding feast, the brooch had fallen from her gown, shattering on the stone floor. She had been humiliated, and Aldrich had used the incident to mock her, to belittle her in front of the assembled nobles. It had been a small cruelty, but it had planted the first seeds of doubt in her mind. She had begun to question herself, to wonder if she was truly worthy of being his queen. "Thank you, Ella R.A., Seraphina said, closing the box with a soft click. "You may tell Lady AMARA that I am deeply grateful for her thoughtfulness." LARA bobbed a curtsy and sta route to withdraw, but Seraphina stopped her with a gentle hand on her ARM weight. The maid froze, her eyes wide with Allah RM. Seraphina studied her face. The girl looked exhausted, the shadows under her eyes a stark contrast to her pale skin. In her first life, Seraphina had never noticed. She had been too absorbed in her own happiness, her own hopes, her own foolish dreams. Now, she saw everything. The faded fabric of Ella Ra's gown, the calluses on her hands from Rs of Ha-RD work, the way she flinched at sudden movements. "You've been with our household for, what, 5 years now?" Seraphina asked, her voice soft. "Yes, my lady," Ella R.A. replied, her voice trembling. "Since I was 12. Your mother took me in after my parents died." Seraphina nodded. "And has anyone ever been unkind to you, anyone who made you feel unwanted?" LARA hesitated. Her gaze flickered to the door, then back to Seraphina. I don't wish to speak out of turn, my lady." "You may speak freely," Seraphina said. "I give you my word that nothing you say will be used against you." The maid's eyes glistened with unshed TRS. "It's Lady AMARA, my lady. She treats me like I am less than dirt. She makes me clean her chambers with a toothbrush, and when I do not do it fast enough, she hits me." She pulled up her sleeve to reveal a row of bruises, purple and yellow, that ran from her wrist to her elbow. "She says if I ever tell anyone, she will have me thrown in the stocks. She says no one will believe a servant over a lady." Seraphina felt a cold rage settle in her chest.
She remembered now.
She remembered the bruises, the rumors, the way Ella R.A. had always seemed so fearful. But she had never questioned it. She had never looked past Amra's sweet, innocent facade. Ella Ra, Serafina said, her voice low and urgent. From this moment on, you answer to me and me alone. Do you understand Lady Amra has no authority over you? If she tries to harm you again, you come to me directly. Do you trust me? The maid Sta read at her, her expression shifting from fear to confusion to something that looked almost like hope. Ah, yes, my lady. I trust you. Serafina squeezed her hand. Good. Now I need you to do something for me. Something that must be kept secret.
Can you do that?
Lara nodded, her jaw set with determination. There is a man in the village, Serafina continued. A merchant named Corbin. He deals in herbs and old books. I need you to go to him and deliver a message. Tell him that the Lady of Ashford requires his services, and that he is to come to the estate tonight, after midnight. He must not be seen. He must use the servants' entrance. She had met Corbin in her first life, yet after her family had been destroyed. He had been one of the few people who had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return, a quiet, unassuming man who dealt in secrets as easily as he dealt in goods. He had knowledge, dangerous knowledge, about the underground networks of the capital, about the corruption that festered beneath the surface of the court.
She would need that knowledge now.
Ella Ra's eyes widened. But my lady, the wedding is tomorrow. Why would you need a merchant of herbs? Because I am not walking into that mariage blind, Serafina said, her voice hardening. I have been blind for too long. It is time I Leah Rened to see. She pressed a small pouch of coins into Ella Ra's hand.
Take this.
If anyone asks, you are going to the market to buy more thread for the seamstresses. Do you understand? Yes, my lady. I understand. Ella Ra tucked the pouch into her sleeve and slipped out of the room, her footsteps silent on the wooden floor. Serafina turned back to the window. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows across the Giardens. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of the stable hands preparing the carriage that would take her to the capital, to the palace, to Aldrich. In a few hours, she would be standing at the altar, waiting to pledge her life to a man who would destroy everything she loved. But not this time. This time, the altar would be a stage, and she would be the one directing the play. She pulled the brooch from the velvet box and examined it closely. The clasp was subtly flawed, just as she remembered. A tiny fracture in the metal, invisible to the naked eye, but enough to cause it to fail under the slightest pressure. Amara had been so clever, so careful. She had planned this moment for months, yet perhaps, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Serafina smiled. It was a cold, hardy smile that did not reach her eyes. She placed the brooch back in the box and set it aside. She would not wear it. She would not give Amara the satisfaction. But she would let Amara believe she had. A knock came at the door again, sharper this time, more demanding. Serafina recognized it immediately. It was her father. Enter, she called. The door swung open to reveal the Duke of Ashford, a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair and kind brown eyes. He was dressed in his formal robes, the black and silver of his house immaculate, but his face was lined with worry. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and took her hands in his. Serafina, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Are you certain about this, about the mariage? She met his gaze. In her first life, she had dismissed his concerns, had told him he was being overprotective. She had pushed him away, and he had died believing she had chosen her prince over her family. I am certain, father, she said, but she squeezed his hands tightly. But I need you to promise me something. Anything, my child. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will trust me. Even if things seem strange. Even if I do things that do not make sense. Promise me you will give me the benefit of the doubt. The Duke studied her face, his brow furrowed. What are you planning? Serafina, you are not the same girl you were yesterday. She smiled, a real smile this time, tinged with sadness. I am not, father. I have seen things. Leah Rened things. I cannot explain it to you yet, but I need you to trust me. Please. He was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. I trust you, my child. I always have. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, the solid warmth of his embrace. In her first life, she had taken this for granted. She had been so sure of his love, so sure that he would always be there, that she had not realized how precious he was until he was gone. I love you, father, she whispered. I love you so much. He held her tighter, his hand stroking her hair. I love you too, my darling.
Now come.
The Riaj is waiting. It is time to make you a princess. She pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand.
Yes.
It is time. As she followed her father out of the room, Serafina allowed herself one last glance at the mirror. The reflection that Sta read back at her was young, beautiful, and utterly transformed. The softness was gone, replaced by something brighter, something that had been forged in the fires of betrayal and death. She had been given a second chance. She had been given the opportunity to rewrite her destiny. And she would not waste it. The Riaj awaited. The prince awaited. The future awaited. And Serafina Vance was ready to meet it all with a smile on her lips and a blade hidden in her sleeve. The Riaj swayed gently as it rolled along the cobblestone road Tawa, RD the capital. Serafina sat by the window, her face a mask of serene composure, but her mind was a battlefield. Every jolt of the wheels, every distant cry of a merchant hawking his Juarez, every shaft of sunlight that pierced the velvet curtains felt like a reminder of the life she had lost and the one she was determined to reclaim. Across from her sat Amara, her half-sister, her betrayer, her enemy. Amara was pretending to read a book of poetry, her delicate fingers turning the pages with exaggerated sierra. She wore a gown of soft lavender, the color of innocence, and her auburn hair was piled artfully atop her head, threaded with tiny pearls that caught the light. She was the picture of devoted sisterly affection, the perfect companion for a nervous bride. Serafina watched her from beneath lowered lashes. She remembered every detail of this journey from her first life. The way Amara had chattered endlessly about the wedding, about how handsome the prince was, about how lucky Serafina was to have found such a love. She had been so full of excitement, so eager to share her joy, that she had not noticed the subtle undercurrent of malice beneath Amara's words. The way her sister's eyes had glittered when she spoke of the prince, the way her fingers had tightened almost imperceptibly on the book's spine when she mentioned the wedding night. You seem quiet, sister, Amara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, concerned. You still nervous, I told you. There is nothing to fear, Prince Aldrich adores you. Everyone can see it. Serafina smiled, a gentle, trusting smile that did not reach her eyes. I am not nervous. I am simply thinking about all the changes that are coming. Changes are good, Amara said brightly. They are opportunities. You will be a princess, Serafina. A future queen. Think of all the things you will be able to do. All the people you will be able to help. Yes, Serafina agreed, her voice soft. I have been thinking a great deal about helping people. Amara's smile flickered, just for a moment, as if she sensed something off in her sister's tone. But then it was back, bright and unwavering. Of course. You have always had such a kind heart. It is one of the things I admire most about you. Serafina said nothing. She simply turned her gaze back to the window, watching the fields roll by. The wheat was golden, ready for harvest, swaying in the breeze like waves on an ocean. She remembered a day from her childhood, a day when she and Amara had run through those fields, laughing, their feet stained with green. She had been so happy then, so blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked beneath her sister's smile. Had Amara always hated her, or had the hatred grown over time, festering like a wound left untreated? Serafina did not know, and she no longer saw red. The reasons did not matter. Only the outcome. The journey to the palace took 4 hours. As the Riaj passed through the outer gates of the capital, Serafina felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. The city was just as she remembered it, bustling, chaotic, alive with the shouts of merchants and the clatter of hooves. The streets were crowded with people, all of them eager to catch a glimpse of the prince's bride. They waved and cheered as the carriage rolled by, their faces bright with hope and excitement. They had no idea that the woman inside the carriage was not the naive girl they had heard about. They had no idea that she had already died once and had returned with a soul forged in fire. The palace loomed ahead, its spires piercing the sky like the fingers of a giant. It was beautiful, impossibly beautiful, a masterpiece of white stone and gold leaf. Serafina had once thought of it as her dream come true, the place where she would build her future, her family, her legacy. Now she saw it for what it truly was, a gilded cage, a fortress of lies, a monument to the ambitions of men who would trample anyone to achieve their goals. The carriage came to a stop in the Courtier Road. Footmen rushed forward to open the doors and lower the steps. Serafina took a deep breath and allowed herself one final moment of quiet. She thought of her father, standing in the doorway of the estate, his face etched with worry. She thought of her mother, who had pressed a small locket into her hand that morning, a locket containing a portrait of them all. She thought of her brothers, who had promised to attend the wedding, who would arrive tomorrow with their wives and children. They would all be there. They would all be safe. She would make sure of it. Amara stepped out of the carriage first, her hand extended to help Serafina down. It was a gesture of sisterly affection, performed for the benefit of the watching crowd. Serafina took her sister's hand, gripping it just a little too tightly, and stepped down onto the cobblestones. The palace courtier was a whirlwind of activity. Nobles and courtiers had gathered to welcome the bride, their silks and velvets a riot of color against the pale stone. Serafina scanned the crowd, her eyes sea-urching for familiar faces. She spotted Lord Amarilo, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, a portly man with a perpetual frown. She spotted Lady Beatrice, the Queen's favorite companion, whose sharp tongue had once cut Serafina to the quick. And there, at the edge of the crowd, she spotted a figure she had not expected to see so soon. Prince Aldrich. He was standing on the steps of the Great Hall, surrounded by his advisors, but his eyes were fixed on her. He was as handsome as she remembered, his golden hair gleaming in the sunlight, his blue eyes warm and inviting. He was dressed in the colors of his house, crimson and gold, and he wore a smile that would have made her heart flutter in her first life. Now, it only made her stomach turn. As she walked toward him, her steps measured, her expression radiant. She could feel Amara's hand on her arm, guiding her forward, and she allowed herself to be led. The crowd passed before them, bowing and curtsying as they passed. The air was thick with the scent of roses and incense, the sounds of hushed whispers and muffled laughter. Aldrich descended the steps to meet her. He took her hands in his touch warm and familiar, and raised them to his lips. "Lady Serafina," he said, his voice rich with charm, "you are even more beautiful than I remembered. The sun itself pales in comparison to your radiance." The words were the same, exactly the same as they had been in her first life. She had swooned then, so overcome with emotion that she could barely speak. Now, she simply smiled and lowered her eyes, playing the part of the shy, modest bride. "You flatter me, Your Highness," she said softly. "I am merely a humble daughter of Ashford, honored to be welcomed into your family." "Nonsense," Aldrich said, drawing her closer. "You are the jewel of the kingdom, and soon you will be my wife." He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm and began to lead her up the steps.
Come.
"My father is eager to meet you. He has heard so many wonderful things about you." Serafina allowed herself to be led, but she was acutely aware of every detail. The way Aldrich's hand rested on hers, possessive and confident. The way Amara had fallen into step behind them, her presence a constant reminder of the betrayal to come. The way the courtiers watched them, their eyes hungry for gossip, their tongues ready to spread whispers. She was not alone. She had her knowledge, her memories, her burning, unquenchable thirst for justice. And she had the merchant Corbin, who would be arriving at the estate tonight with the information she needed to begin dismantling Aldrich's web of lies. The great hall of the palace was even more magnificent than she remembered. The ceiling was vaulted, painted with scenes of gods and heroes, and the walls were lined with tapestries depicting the kingdom's history. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat the king and queen. King Aldous was a tired-looking man with graying hair and weary eyes, his crown resting heavily on his brow. Queen Marguerite was a thin, Shah-RP-featured woman with a permanent expression of disapproval. Neither of them had ever particularly liked Serafina. In her first life, they had tolerated her for the sake of their son, but they had never truly accepted her. She had always been an outsider, a woman from the provinces, not quite worthy of the royal bloodline. Serafina curtsied deeply, her gown pooling around her like a pool of spilled ink. "Your Majesties, it is an honor to be received by you." The king waved a dismissive hand. "Rise, child. There is no need for such formality. You are to be our daughter soon." The queen said nothing. She simply studied Serafina with cold, calculating eyes. Aldrich led Serafina to a seat near the dais, where she was surrounded by a flurry of attendants and well-wishers. Amara had to sape red into the crowd, no doubt to find her own place among the courtiers. Serafina accepted a glass of wine from a servant and took a refill sip, using the time to observe the room. She saw Lord Cedric, the master of whispers, a man who dealt in secrets and had a price for everything. She saw Lady Rosalind, a young widow who had once tried to warn her about Aldrich's infidelities, but whom she had dismissed as jealous and bitter. She saw Sir Amarcus, the captain of the Royal Guardi, a man whose loyalty could be bought with the right amount of gold, and then she saw something she had not expected. At the far end of the hall, standing alone in the shadows of a pillar, was a man she had never met in her first life. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair as black as a raven's wing and eyes the color of storm clouds. He was dressed simply, in arche leather and silver, and he ride himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. He was watching her, his gaze intense and unreadable. Serafina felt a chill run down her spine. Who was he? Why was he ring at her? She had been refill to avoid changing anything significant. But she was already beginning to realize that her second life would not be a simple replay of the first. Her choices had already altered the path of events, and she had no idea what new dangers might be lurking in the shadows. Aldrich leaned close, his breath against her ear. "That is Lord Rhys," he murmured, his voice tinged with a warning. "My half-brother. He is an unusual man. I would advise you to keep your distance." Serafina's skipped a beat. Aldrich had never mentioned a half-brother in her first life. This was something new, something she had not anticipated. A wild card in the game she had thought she understood. She met the man's gaze across the hall, and for a moment, she saw something flicker in his storm-gray eyes. Was it recognition, running, or something else entirely? She turned back to Aldrich, her smile back in place. "Of course, my love. I would never dream of doing anything to displease you." But in the back of her mind, a new question was forming. Lord Rhys, the half-brother Aldrich had never mentioned. Why had he been hidden from her? What role was he meant to play in the unfolding drama? The game had just become more complicated. And Serafina Vance, the woman who had already lost everything once, was determined to win it all back. The feast began. The music swelled, and the dancers took to the floor. But Serafina's eyes kept drifting to the shadowed figure in the corner, the man who watched her with knowing eyes. She did not know who he was or what he wanted. But she knew one thing for certain. He was a part of this story, a part she had not seen coming. And she was going to find out exactly what part that was. The feast stretched on like an endless river of silk and gold. Serafina smiled until her cheeks ached, accepted compliments until her ears rang, and sipped wine until her head swam. But beneath the reefily constructed mask of the blissful bride-to-be, her mind was racing, cataloging every face, every whisper, every subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. She had not forgotten the man in the shadows. Lord Rhys, Aldrich's half-brother. A name that had never been spoken in her first life, a presence that had never been acknowledged. She had scoured her memories, searching for any hint of him, any fragment of conversation that might explain his absence. But there was nothing. It was as if he had been erased from history, a ghost who had never existed. Except he did exist. She had seen him with her own eyes, felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. And that gaze had not been indifferent. It had been sharp, knowing, almost accusatory. As if he could see through her performance, could sense the fire burning beneath her serene exterior. She needed to learn more about him. But that would have to wait. For now, she had more immediate concerns. The dancing had begun, and Aldrich had claimed her for the first set. He led her to the center of the floor, his hand firm on her waist, his smile as polished as his boots. The music swelled, a lively melody that would have made her soa in her first life. Now it was merely background noise, a distraction from the game she was playing. "You dance beautifully," Aldrich murmured, spinning her into a turn. "I cannot wait to see you in the throne room, standing at my side." "Nor I," Seraphina replied, her voice sweet. "I have dreamed of this moment for so long, of being your wife, your partner, your queen." She watched his face ruefully, searching for any crack in his perfect facade. But there was nothing. He was every inch the devoted prince, his eyes his smile genuine. If she had not known the truth, she would have believed him. She had believed him once, and it had cost her everything. The dance ended, and Aldrich released her with a bow. "I must attend to some matters," he said, his tone apologetic. "But I will return for you shortly. In the meantime, please enjoy the festivities. My mother has prepared a special performance for the guests." He read into the crowd, and Seraphina found herself alone. She was not surprised. In her first life, he had used the same excuse, leaving her to navigate the treacherous waters of the court on her own. She had been too naive to see it for what it was, a deliberate abandonment, a test of her vulnerability. She was not naive anymore. She drifted through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing servant, smiling at the nobles who approached her with congratulations. She was an expert at this now, this dance of pleasantries and empty promises. She could have done it in her sleep, but as she moved through the hall, she noticed something strange. There was a tension in the air, a current of unease that had not been there before. The courtiers' smiles were a little too bright, their laughter a little too loud. Something was happening, something that had not happened in her first life. She made her way toward the edge of the crowd, where the shadows grew deeper and the whispers grew louder. And there, tucked into an alcove behind a tapestry, she found a small group of nobles huddled together, their voices low and urgent. "Did you hear?" one of them was saying, a thin, nervous man with a receding hairline. "The prince has been seen meeting with the northern lords. In secret. No one was supposed to know." "Northern lords," another whispered, a woman with a sharp face and sharper eyes. "But the north has been in rebellion for years. Why would he meet with them?" "Perhaps he is trying to broker a peace," a third suggested, a portly man with a heavy gold chain around his neck. "Or perhaps he is making alliances, the kind that do not involve the king." Seraphina's blood ran cold. The Northern Rebellion. It had been a constant thorn in the kingdom's side, a simmering conflict that had never been resolved. In her first life, Aldrich had used it to his advantage, positioning himself as the peacemaker, the hero who had brought the North back into the fold. But she had never known that he had been meeting with the rebels behind the king's back. This was new. This was dangerous. And it was exactly the kind of information she needed. She stepped back from the alcove, her heart pounding. She had to find a way to use this, to turn it against Aldrich. But she also had to be careful. If she made a move too soon, she would reveal her hand, and all would be lost. She was so lost in thought that she did not notice the figure until she collided with him. "I apologize," she said, stepping back quickly. "I was not watching where I was," she stopped mid-sentence. It was him, Lord Reese. He was standing in front of her, his face half hidden in shadow, but his eyes were unmistakable. They were fixed on her with that same intense, unreadable gaze. "Lady Seraphina," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I hope I did not rile you." "Not at all," she replied, recovering quickly. "I was simply lost in thought. This is a magnificent hall. Is it not so much to take in?" "Indeed," he agreed. "Though I find that the most interesting things are often hidden in plain sight." He tilted his head, studying her. "You seem different tonight, my lady. More hourly than I expected." She felt a jolt of Allah RM. What did he mean by that? Had he seen through her mask? Was he testing her? She laughed, a light, free sound that she had perfected over years of practice. "I suppose I am simply nervous. It is not every day that a woman gets married to a prince." "No," he said, his voice soft. "It is not. But I wonder if you truly know what you are getting into." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Seraphina felt a chill run down her spine. He knew something. He knew, and he was trying to warn her. "I have no idea what you mean, my lord," she said ruefully. "I am simply a woman in love, eager to marry the man of my dreams." He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that did not reach his eyes. "Of course. I wish you every happiness, Lady Seraphina. But if you ever find yourself in need of advice, or perhaps a different perspective, I am not difficult to find." He bowed and disappeared red into the crowd, leaving her standing alone in the alcove, her mind reeling. What had just happened? Had Lord Reese just offered her an alliance, or had he been testing her, trying to see if she would take the bait? She did not know, but she knew one thing for certain. He was not a man to be underestimated. He was a player in this game, and she needed to figure out which side he was on. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The king gave a speech, the queen gave a toast, and the courtiers continued to dance and drink and whisper. Seraphina went through the motions, her smile fixed in place, but her mind was elsewhere, turning over the events of the night. As the feast wound down, she excused herself to the ladies' retiring room. She needed a moment of quiet, a moment to think. But when she entered the small chamber, she found Amara already there, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair. "Seraphina," Amara exclaimed, turning with a bright smile. "I was wondering where you had gone. You seemed so distracted during the feast." "Is everything all right?" Seraphina smiled back, her expression warm. "Everything is perfect, sister. I am simply tired. It has been a long day." Amara crossed the room and took her hands. "I know. It is overwhelming, is it not? But soon it will all be worth it. You will be a princess, and all of this will seem like a distant dream." "A distant dream," Seraphina repeated, her voice soft. "Yes, I suppose it will." Amara squeezed her hands and then released them. "I will leave you to freshen up. We have an EARLYSTA tomorrow, and you need your rest." She paused at the door, turning back with a smile. "Oh, and Seraphina, I brought the brooch I gave you. I do hope you will wear it tomorrow. It would mean so much to me." Seraphina nodded. "Of course, sister. I would not dream of disappointing you." Amara left, and Seraphina was alone. She stood in front of the mirror, STA ring at her reflection. The face that STA read back was young and beautiful, but there was a hardness in her eyes that had not been there before. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small pouch. It was the pouch she had given Ella R.A., the one containing the coins for the merchant. But there was something else in it now. A small vial, filled with a clear odorless liquid. Corbin had come through. The message had been delivered, and the vial had arrived at the estate just before she left. It was a poison, slow-acting and NEARLY undetectable, the kind of thing that could be slipped into a glass of wine without anyone ever knowing. But it was not for Aldrich. Not yet. She was not ready to use it. She still needed to gather more information, still needed to understand the full extent of the conspiracy against her. The poison was a contingency, a tool to be used only if all else failed. She tucked the vial back into her sleeve and smoothed her gown. She had a long night ahead of her, and she needed to be sharp. There was a meeting to attend, a meeting that had not happened in her first life, that Lord Reese had said he was not difficult to find. And she had a feeling that finding him would be the key to everything. She left the chamber and made her way through the winding corridors of the palace, her footsteps silent on the cold stone floor. The glorifies had been told to expect her, and she knew the passwords that would grant her passage. This was not her first time sneaking through the palace at night. In her first life, she had done it countless times, visiting Aldrich in his chambers, stealing moments of intimacy in the shadows. Now, she was doing it for a different reason. She reached a small door at the end of a narrow corridor and knocked twice. The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with maps and papers. And there, seated at a desk, was Lord Reese. He looked up as she entered, his expression unsurprised. "I was wondering when you would come," he said. "I must say, Lady Seraphina, you are full of surprises." She closed the door behind her and faced him. "And you, my lord, a mystery. But I have a feeling that we have more in common than either of us would like to admit." He raised an eyebrow. "Do we?" "I think so," she said, meeting his gaze. "I think we both know that there is a storm coming. And I think we both know that the only way to survive it is to stand together." He was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, a genuine smile that softened the hard lines of his face. "You are more than I expected, Lady Seraphina. Much more." "And you, my lord," she replied, exactly what I was hoping to find." The game had just become a partnership, and Seraphina Vance was ready to play it to the end. The cold stone of the palace walls pressed against Seraphina's back as she slipped through the servants' passageway, her heart hammering a steady rhythm against her ribs. The hour was late, the corridors empty save for the distant footsteps of the night watch. She had left Lord Reese's chambers an hour ago, their conversation still echoing in her mind like a half-remembered melody. He had told her everything. The Northern Lords, the secret alliances, the whispered promises that Aldrich had made to secure their support. It was worse than she had imagined. Aldrich was not merely planning to seize the throne. He was planning to dismantle the kingdom itself, to break it into pieces and sell those pieces to the highest bidder. The Northern Lords wanted independence. The Southern merchants wanted control of the trade routes. And Aldrich wanted them both as his puppets, dancing on strings he alone controlled. But Reese had given her the weapons she needed. Names, dates, locations. A network of loyalists who had been waiting for the right moment to act. And a plan that would bring Aldrich's ambitions crashing down around him. The wedding was in 12 hours. 12 hours to change the course of history. 12 hours to save her family, her kingdom, and herself. She reached the small chamber that had been assigned to her for the night. It was modest by palace standards, but it was private, and that was all that mattered. She slipped inside, locked the door behind her, and crossed to the window. The moon was full, casting silver light across the gardens below. It was beautiful, almost peaceful. But she knew that peace was an illusion. A soft knock came at the door. She tensed, her hand moving instinctively to the dagger she had hidden in her sleeve. But then a familiar voice whispered through the wood, "My lady, it is Ella, R.A." Seraphina opened the door, and the maid slipped inside, her face pale and her eyes wide with urgency. "My lady, I have news. Terrible news." "What is it?" Seraphina asked, her voice low. "It is your father, my lady. He arrived at the palace an hour ago, but he was turned away at the gates. The glorifies said the prince had given orders that no one was to see you before the wedding. They were not gentle with him, my lady. He was pushed and he fell. He struck his head on the cobblestones." Seraphina felt the blood drain from her face. "Is he hurt? Is he?" "He is alive, my lady. He was taken to a healer in the city."
"But he is not well."
"The healer said he may not wake until morning. I came as soon as he rode." A cold fury settled in Seraphina's chest. Aldrich had done this. He had ordered her father turned away, knowing the old duke would not go quietly. He had wanted to isolate her, to strip away her final support, to leave her alone and vulnerable on the night before her wedding. But he had miscalculated. He had underestimated her. "Thank you, Ella R.A.," she said, her voice steady despite the rage burning within her. "You have done well. Now I need you to do one more thing for me." "Anything, my lady." "Go to Lord Reese. Tell him that the plan has changed. Tell him we move tonight, not at dawn." L.A. Ra's eyes widened. "Tonight, but my lady, the wedding?" "The wedding will not happen," Seraphina said, her voice cold as steel. "Not tomorrow. Not ever. I am going to end this now." The maid nodded, her face set with determination. She slipped out of the room, her footsteps silent on the stone floor. Seraphina waited a moment, then moved to the small chest at the foot of her bed. She opened it and pulled out the gown she had been planning to wear to the wedding. It was a beautiful thing, white silk threaded with silver, the bodice embroidered with tiny pearls. She had chosen it with such cierie, believing it would be the dress she wore to begin her new life. Now it would serve a different purpose. She changed quickly, pulling the gown over her head and smoothing the fabric. She did not bother with jewels or ornaments. She did not need them. She was not dressing as a bride. She was dressing as a warrior, and her armor was silk. She retrieved the vial of poison from her sleeve and tucked it into a hidden pocket in the gown's folds. Then she picked up the brooch Amara had given her, the one with the flawed clasp, and pinned it to her bodice. It was a reminder of everything she had lost and everything she had yet to reclaim. She took a deep breath and opened the door. The corridors of the palace were quiet, but she knew where to go. She had walked this path in her first life, on the night of her wedding, when she had been so full of hope that she had not seen the trap closing around her. Now, she walked it again, but this time, she was the one setting the trap. She reached the doors of the great hall and pushed them open. The room was empty, the tables clear red, the candles extinguished. But at the far end, standing on the dais where the king's throne sat, was Aldrich. He was waiting for her. He had expected her to come. "Seraphina," he said, his voice smooth and warm, "I knew you would find your way here. I have been waiting for you." She walked toward him, her steps measured, her expression serene. "Have you, Aldrich? I am flattered." He smiled, that charming, disarming smile that had once made her heart flutter. "I wanted to see you, to tell you how much I have been looking forward to tomorrow. To our future together." "To our future," she repeated, stopping a few feet away from him. "Tell me, Aldrich, what kind of future do you see? One where I am your queen, or one where I am your pawn?" His smile faltered, just for a moment. "What are you talking about? My love, you are my queen, my partner, my equal." She took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. "Then why are their northern lords camped outside the capital, waiting for your signal? Why are the merchants bribing your advisors to look the other way? Why did you have my father attacked tonight? To keep him from warning me?" The mask cracked. Aldrich's face twisted, the charm replaced by something cold and dangerous. "You have been listening to rumors, Seraphina. Rumors planted by my enemies. You should not believe everything you hear." "I do not believe rumors," she said, her voice soft. "I believe what I see. And I have seen enough." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the vial of poison. "Do you know what this is, Aldrich?" His eyes widened. "What are you doing? Put that down." "It is a slow-acting poison," she said, turning it in her fingers. "It is almost undetectable. A few drops in a glass of wine, and the victim will sicken over the course of several weeks. They will grow weaker, more confused. They will not suspect poison because they will have no reason to suspect it. And by the time they realize what has happened, it will be too late." His face had gone pale. "You would poison me, your future husband or king. I would poison you in a heartbeat," she said, her voice cold. "But I am not going to, because you are not worth the effort. You are not a king, Aldrich. You are a coward, a snake, a man who would destroy his own kingdom to satisfy his ambition." She set the vial down on the table beside her. I am going to walk out of this hall, and I am going to find my father. And then I am going to bring everything you have done into the light. The northern lords will know you have betrayed them. The merchants will know you have been playing them for fools. And the king, your father, will know the truth about the son he trusted. Aldrich laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. You think anyone will believe you a real woman, Seraphina. A woman from the provinces.
Who will listen to you? She smiled.
I have Lord Rhys. His face went white. Rhys, you have been speaking to Rhys. He is nothing. A bastarde. A shadow. He has no power. Power is not always worn on a crown, she said. Sometimes it is worn in the shadows. And Rhys has been watching you for a long time, Aldrich. He knows everything. Every secret, every deal, every betrayal. He has been waiting for the moment to strike. And I just gave him the signal. As if on cue, the doors to the hall burst open. Glorifies flooded in, led by Lord Rhys himself. His gray eyes were cold, his expression grim. Behind him came the king, his face a mask of fury, and the queen, her thin lips pressed into a hot RD line. Aldrich took a step back. Father, I can explain. Explain, the king ROA read. Explain how you have been conspiring with our enemies. Explain how you have been plotting to break this kingdom. APA, RT, explain how you have been planning to murder your own bride. Aldrich's composure shattered. He looked around wildly, sea urching for an escape, but there was none. He was cornered, trapped in the web he had spun for himself. You cannot do this, he said, his voice rising. I am your son, your heir. You cannot. I can do whatever I wish, the king said, his voice cold. You are no longer my heir. You are a traitor. And traitors a executed. The RDS moved four-way RD, seizing Aldrich by the arms. He struggled, screamed, but they were too strong. They dragged him Tawa RD the doors, his golden hair disheveled, his fine robes torn. Seraphina watched him go, her heart pounding. She felt no pity, only a cold, quiet satisfaction. She turned to Lord Rhys. Thank you. He nodded, his expression softening. You did well, Seraphina. You were brave. I had no choice, she said. I had already lost everything once. I was not going to lose it again. The king approached her, his face weary but kind. Lady Seraphina, I owe you an apology. I did not see the truth about my son. I allowed myself to be deceived. You have saved this kingdom tonight. I will not forget it. She curtsied. I did what was necessary, your majesty. I would do it again. And what about the wedding? The queen asked, her voice sharp. There is no prince to Maharawi now. What will become of you? Seraphina looked at Rhys. He was watching her, his gray eyes unreadable. But there was something there, something that had not been there before. A rmth. A promise, the wedding, she said slowly, will not happen. But that does not mean I will not find happiness. She stepped Tawa RD Rhys, her eyes locked on his. Perhaps I have already found it. His hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. Perhaps, he agreed, his voice low. You have. The king sighed.
Very well.
There will be time enough to sort out the details in the morning. For now, I suggest you both get some rest. It has been a long night. Seraphina nodded. She walked out of the hall, Rhys's hand still clasped in hers. The moon was setting, and the first light of dawn was beginning to color the sky. It was a new day, a new beginning. As they reached the gardens, she paused, her eyes falling on the rose bushes her mother had planted. They were in bloom, the crimson petals bright against the green leaves. She reached out and touched one, its softness like a whisper against her skin. I used to think that love was a weakness, she said softly, that it made you vulnerable, made you blind. But I was wrong. Love is not a weakness. It is a strength. It is what makes us fight, what makes us survive. And I will never make the mistake of forgetting that again. Rhys squeezed her hand. Nor will I. They stood together in the garden, the sun rising behind them, casting their shadows long across the grass. It was a new day, a new life, and Seraphina Vance was ready to live it. She released Rhys's hand, and reached up to unpin the brooch from her bodice. The flawed clasp, the symbol of Amra's betrayal, fell to the ground and shattered on the stones. She looked at the broken pieces for a moment, then turned away. It was time to let go of the past. Time to embrace the future. Time to finally, truly, live. The sun climbed higher, and the world was bathed in gold. And Seraphina smiled, a real smile, one that reached her eyes, and War met her. She was free. At last, she was free.